So last week we started a series on getting past your past and looking at the black hole of regret versus repentance and hope. And if you missed that, I encourage you to go back and take a re-listen. Over the next couple of weeks, though, we're going to be looking over our past in terms of three categories. There's the my bad, the your bad, and it's bad. And typically when we're looking back over our past, there's things that come back that we struggle with that fall in one of those three categories. And how we deal with each of those differs based on whether it's something that I've done, something that's been done to me, or just something that just kind of happened. And so we're going to be looking over those three things and those three categories in the next couple of weeks. Today, though, we're going to be looking at the first one of which is my bad. Everybody goes through times, seasons of their life where they experience depression. Now, some people struggle with depression all the time, but everybody will go through a season of their life where they struggle with depression. People will go through times where you have anxiety, and what's odd about when you go through those seasons is you don't really know why. Sometimes you do. I mean, let's face it, if you've gone through death or a major separation of something that's happened, it's easy to pinpoint, okay, this is why I'm feeling down. But a lot of times, maybe you've been there, you just kind of, somebody say, what's wrong? You're like, I don't know, I'm just kind of in a funk lately. Well, why? I don't know. I don't know why. At the same time, many of us will also either chronically struggle with or go in and out of feelings of things like inadequacy, insignificance, shame, low self-esteem, feeling unworthy of someone's love, unworthy of respect. And when asked about that, sometimes maybe you have somebody close in your life who will ask you some question like, why do you feel that way? Really? You struggle with low self? Why? And sometimes you'll just be like, well, I don't know. I don't really know. And because we don't really know, what ends up happening, and this is sort of the functional reality of life, is we tend to, what doctors would call, treat the symptoms and not the cause. That's where, like when you're feeling down, what do your friends want to do? They want to cheer you up. Same thing I want to do when I'm feeling down. I want to cheer myself up. And so we'll look to things to cheer ourselves up. We'll look to things to sort of medicate the feeling in a way. And either we turn to a relationship to do that, or we turn to a substance to do that, or a new purchase to do that. I mean, everybody likes a little retail therapy sometimes. That can make you feel good, feel better about yourself. If you don't like the way you look, just go buy something. Maybe you'll feel like, you look better in that for a season. I don't know. Other times, what we do is, maybe if you're dealing when struggling with self-worth or inadequacy, sometimes people turn to it. And see, here's the thing. Some of these things can look really good. Not everything looks like a hurt habit or a hang-up that is a hurt habit or a hang-up. For sometimes, it's somebody who's chronically always trying to help other people. They can never say no. Remember I mentioned that codependency issue? It's in that category sometimes. Because in doing that, you're doing it all so that somebody will tell you what a good person you are and constantly feed into you because you have these issues of low self-worth or inadequacy. Or other times, people will dress for attention or do something for attention. Sometimes you've seen a woman who wants the attention of every man, and they are never satisfied with the attention of one man. Nope, every guy's got to look at them everywhere they go by what they do. For some people, they got to be the life of the party. They've always got to be the center of attention. And they're not satisfied with a small group of friends. They got to have everybody always looking at them. And the reason why a lot of times these things happen is because we're treating these feelings of either short-term or long-term issues of self-worth or depression or some other issue that's come in there. And all along, the hard question we saw from that opening video is, how did I get here? You ever ask that question? Wake up one morning and go, how did I get here? Like you think back 30 years ago, this was not where I thought I would be right now. Anybody got that t-shirt? Maybe that'll be our next CR shirt. I don't know how good of a shirt that would be, but I've done some crafting on that one. But at Celebrate Recovery, step 4 of Celebrate Recovery, where you do a searching and fearless moral inventory, what you're doing is you're trying to answer the question of, how did I get here? How did I get here? And you're not going to know unless you really go looking for those answers. You go sort of and do it. And that's why That passage out of Lamentations 3:40 says, let us examine our ways and test them, and let us return to the Lord. The context for that, by the way, is Jerusalem has been destroyed. The people are being carried off into captivity. There's been hundreds of years of sin and other kinds of dysfunction going on in the community, and God keeps on saying, one more time, I'm warning you. One more time, I'm warning you. One more time, I'm warning you. He's been doing that for hundreds of years. And finally, he's like, that's it, I'm done. And so then everybody has these self-reflecting questions, asking, how did this happen? What do you mean, how did this happen? You should know how this happened. But then individually, Jeremiah turns to the people and he's like, okay, we understand why collectively as a community this has happened to us. But each of us have to, what part of I contributed to what has happened here? That's why he says, let us each examine our ways and test them. And by the way, this idea of examining our ways and test them is found throughout the whole Bible. This isn't just something that was done right there during the time of Lamentations. David talks about this over in Psalm 139. He says, search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me. Let me know if there's what are my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me to the way everlasting. If you go over to the New Testament, every time we take communion, we're supposed to examine ourselves and think through our life and really ask ourselves a question of, what is it that I'm coming up here asking for forgiveness for? God doesn't want you to just go through the motions in your Christian walk. He doesn't want you to just come into church, punch off the ticket, and go home. He doesn't want you just to come up here, pick up a piece of bread, dip it in a cup, eat it, and walk out. He says, examine yourselves so that you know what it is you're really asking God for forgiveness for. Now, the honest truth is a lot of times we don't know. We just kind of generally go, well, certainly I'm not perfect, so God, just forgive me in general, and let's get on with the day. Well, at some point, you begin to ask the question, how did I get here? And part of that answer is also you're going to find some of the things that maybe are wrapped up in the examination of what it is you're coming forward for communion. Now, when you go through and do this kind of examination, there's three general categories you're going to find that comes up in your past. There's the stuff that would be in the category of my bad, the stuff that would be in the category of your bad, and then stuff that's in the category of it's bad. Pretty self-explanatory almost what each one of those are. There are things you go back over your life and you go, yep, that was all me. I did that. For some of you, you will pendulum swing so far over to this. You've had so many issues of lack of self-esteem, self-worth, self-deprecating. You're going to look at everything in your life and it's all been your fault. Some of you codependents are out there in this same boat. Some of you you're just always down yourself, always depressed. Everything's always your fault. Some of you are going to have a tendency to put everything in the category of it's all me, regardless of what it was. Other people, though, this is like the majority, we'll go into everything's going to go in the category of somebody else's fault, your fault. We'll list out who the yous are as you're going through all of those things. But it's easy to sort of go over to this place and always put the blame on somebody else. Now, when you look through that, one is self-toxic, and the other is self-intoxicated. The other one is toxic to yourself, where you're always putting yourself down. The other one just shows that you are sort of intoxicated in how you're seeing life. That's why so many times the Bible will say, sober up in your judgments. Because it's so easy, it's so natural to us to justify and minimize and excuse our actions by blaming on somebody else. Now, as you go through and you look through stuff, even the stuff, by the way, that's in the your bad category, just because something's in a your bad category doesn't mean there's not any my bad in that. You with me on this? Just because it falls in a your bad category. In other words, the reason why this happened overall was because of something that somebody else did to me, said to me. I didn't ask to be in this situation. Somebody else brought me into this situation. However, there's also oftentimes a my bad piece of it in there. How did I handle it? Did I respond with bitterness? Have I responded with some resentment or revenge or passive aggressive? Has there been violence in the way that I've responded to this, either towards myself or towards other people? Could be towards the person who did to me, or it could be taking out everybody else. How have I handled the your bad pieces that have come into my life? There can be issues of codependency that come up there. There could be issues of survivor's guilt, where you carry around this guilt for something that you didn't do at all. And that's still a my bad piece of your bad. You were wrong in doing this. But the my bad piece is I'm feeling guilty for something that somebody else did to me, and I shouldn't be feeling guilty for something else that was done to me. Now, I just got to give a disclaimer here. In the your bad category, the things that come out my bad just because there's some my bad issues in the your bad category, I want to make sure I read this right. It's not me saying that I'm contributing. In other words, what I'm not saying here is let me back this up. Just because I'm saying in this situation that I've done some things wrong in the midst of what you did, just because I'm saying that, and just because I'm also saying that my reaction to it has compounded my problems, is not absolving the person of what they've done. Does that make sense? I'm not taking away, I'm not minimizing that at all. I'm not putting the blame on you for that at all. I just want to make sure you know that. However, a lot of times what's happened is that somebody else has done something to us. The way we've responded to it has been extremely destructive, but I'm blaming 100% of the results on what they did. Do you see that? I remember somebody came to me one time and said, Steve, there are a lot of people who've had the same thing done to them that you've had done to you, but they didn't respond like that. And what you're struggling with right now, is more so off of how you've handled it, more so than what was done. And you don't get a free pass on your reaction simply because of what was done to you. Does that make sense? That in no way is minimizing what was done. That in no way is taking away the sin and acknowledgement of what they've done there at all. Now, how did I get here? In there it says we've made a searching and fearless moral inventory. Fearless. If you notice in the opening, there were two clips in there that I purposely put in there. One of them, of course, was from the Men in Black 3 movie, where he says, "Don't ask questions you don't want the answer to." That's pretty much a thing we all live by in life, isn't it? I don't want to ask any questions I don't want the answer to. If you're going to really do this, and you really want to know how did I get here, you're going to have to ask some questions you don't want the answer to. Fair enough? If you're going to really know how it is that you got here, you're going to have to be willing to ask some questions you don't want to know the answer. That's where the fearless piece comes in. The other piece of it, the question is I sort of cut it off in there, but you know the quote from A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth. And that's the other reason why we haven't asked these questions in the past. The reason why more people don't go through their past and sort things out and try to figure out what it is that's contribute to where I'm at right now, it's because the honest truth is we don't want the truth. There was one of the great quotes I read. It says, "It's really hard to accept the truth when the lies are what we really wanted to hear anyway." But there's two things about when you look at quotes on truth, they usually fall in one of two categories. One is the idea that the truth will set you free. We all know that, right? But we also know that the truth hurts, right? Another person said this way: "Truth is a hard pill to swallow, but it goes down a lot easier than pride." You're less likely to choke on it than you are on your own pride. Now, in doing this fearless searching moral inventory, knowing that your tendency is to not want to uncover some things, and knowing that your tendency is going to be to not want to really face the truth, there's two biblical truths you need to know as you go through and do a searching and fearless moral inventory as you're looking through your past. One comes to us out of Jeremiah 17:9. The heart is deceitful above all things. Heart is deceitful above all things. In other words, let me put it this way. Your natural instinct is to lie to yourself. Your natural instinct is to lie to yourself. And so when you go through and you do this, there's going to be a tendency for you to want to blame somebody else when there's blame that goes to you. There's going to be a tendency to say, well, I don't really need to get into that. There's going to be a tendency to sort of put something in a very broad category when you know there's a very definite category. There's going to be a tendency for you to want to say, well, this is why that happened. But if you're really honest with yourself, you know there was either a motive of lust or greed or something else that was there that pushed you to that place. And you got to be honest because of the second principle that we get out of Scripture. You can't heal what you won't acknowledge. You can't heal what you won't acknowledge. It comes out of James chapter 5, verse 16. Confess your sins and pray for each other so that you can be healed. You can't heal what you won't acknowledge. You can't walk into the doctor's office and say, well, doc, I'm not feeling good. What's wrong? I don't want to get into it. Can you give me something? But isn't that what we often do when it comes to these areas? Maybe if you're a part of a 12-step program like Celebrate Recovery, sponsor comes in, it's like, okay, let's get honest. Let's talk about this. What can I be praying for you about? Just pray for me in general. That's not how this works. That's not how you're violating a life principle that just isn't going to work. So when it says you make a searching, that's where you're looking at everything. You're putting there's no place you're not putting the spotlight on. And fearless moral inventory. The fearless part is the truth is a scary thing. Because the reality is every single one of us has sin in our own hearts. And when you look back through our past, it's going to come out. And it's a really tough thing to deal with. Second thing about this is write it down. You got to write this down. If you ever do a step study, you'll be writing it down. This isn't just something that you do when you're going through a Celebrate Recovery thing. I think this is good in every area, for anybody who, if you want to know the answer to the question of how did I get here, you need to write this stuff down. Here's why. Let's just say that you go through and you start writing all this stuff down, and after doing a searching and fearless inventory, you get real honest and you really go through everything. You identify 35 things. There are 35 issues, whether they're in the my bad, the your bad, the it's bad category of my life. There are 35 things that I could look at and say, these 35 things would be the answer to the question of how did I get here? And why do I have these bouts of depression? Why do I have these bouts of anxiety? Why do I go through these issues of self-loathing? Why do I have this sense of overwhelming guilt that comes over me? Why does it feel like I'm unlovable? You want to know why all that is? I can point to it's on this list of 35 things. The thing about that is once you get those 35 things down, dealing with it becomes, I'm going to use this word, manageable. Now, I don't know how good your brain is, but I always tell whenever somebody's giving me a list and I go to the store, I can keep track of 2 things, all right? I don't care who's sending me to the list. I don't care if it's for the office or for home, kids, anybody. Want me to pick up something at Walmart? I can remember 2 things. Once I get past 2, something's going to get forgotten unless I write it down. I just can't manage a list bigger than 2. So I know that for my grocery list. Imagine what that's like for the list of the things that answers the question of how did I get here? Okay? The thing is when there's a list of 35 things and they all get piled up, it feels unmanageable. Or I'll use another word, it's overwhelming. 35 things, when they're listed out, it's 35 things, right? 35 things when they're not listed out and clearly defined feels like a million because you can't keep track of it. That's that same restless sense you have when you're at Walmart and you're walking around, you're going, oh, I know there's more stuff I need. I know there's more stuff I need. I know there's more stuff I need. And so I do one of 2 things. I either just leave knowing I'm going to have to come back either later that night or the next day, or I do the dumb thing and I just start buying a bunch of stuff. Then I find out I got 17 spaghetti sauces at home. I got enough, spaghetti noodle. I mean, are you with me on this? Like your pantry has like overstocked of one thing, like you've got all sauce but no noodles, that kind of thing, right? It's not good when your brain is full of all sauce and no noodles. I don't know what that is, but in recovery, step 1 has this little phrase in it that our lives have become, what's the word? Unmanageable. Unmanageable. Part of the unmanageable is the fact that even once you've figured out there's 35 things, if you don't have those things written down, it's going to still feel very unmanageable because there's just so many things. Now, picture if there were, let's just say there was 35 people that each had a request of you, okay? What would be better? For everybody, let's just do this. I'll play right now. There's a little more than 35 in here right now. But think of one thing that you would like me to get you from the grocery store, okay? Don't say it all at once. I'm going to count to 5, and at some point in the 5, tell me what those things are. Okay. Now, if I'd gone through and said, we're going to do this one at a time, and I were to write them down, much different, right? Your brain feels like that, though, as these things are coming in, right? There was that issue when I was a child. There was an issue when I was in high school. Oh, but then there was that thing last week. But then my husband's upset about this. But then my kids had this issue. And they just keep on coming in at you. However, once you go through and you see there's 35 things. 35? Yeah, there's a lot of things there. But now you put down this list. And what's going to happen as you look down at this list, there's going to be a couple of those things. Usually the very first, 2 or 3 things that you wrote down. Maybe not. I don't know. But for me, they're the ones that come up. There's going to be a handful of those 35 things that are major issues. It's a major issue. It very well may be the reason why you started coming to church. Maybe it's the reason why your marriage is in difficulty. Maybe the very reason why you started coming to some place like Celebrate Recovery or want to join a small group. You know what those things are. Those are probably when you first start thinking about, well, how did I get here? You know that's going to be on the list. You don't really want to deal with all the ins and outs and whys on it. But as you look at that 35, only some of those 35 are going to be in this category of things that are major life issues that's going to take your full effort to deal with. When I say full effort, I'm talking about it's going to be hard work. It's going to be some prayer. It's going to be accountability, people come alongside of you. It's going to require some new behaviors. It's going to require changes you don't want to make. There's going to be some financial costs associated with it. Jesus even says some things like you may need to take off a limb, cut out an eye. Cut off an eye? Cut off a limb? Try to cut one of these things off of one of your kids. How many of y'all think they would rather give up their pinky finger than lose this thing? Okay, so I think we get the picture. But for some, let's face it, this is something that has to go, right? So there's going to be some things on that list, not all of them. There's going to be some things on that list, on that 35, that are some major issues, right? If all 35 were that might be overwhelming. But you're going to find that not all 35 fall in that category, but some of them do. There's other things on that list, though, which are going to be some things that you put in the category of, it's going to force me to have a conversation I've been avoiding. Maybe that's part of the making amends. Maybe it's the part of clearing the air. Maybe it's the discussion of the your bad and the my bad discussion. There's going to be some things on there that are going to force a discussion that's long overdue. And the thing about that is once you have that, it might be something you get to cross off your list. Do you know how fun that is? When you've had this weight coming over you for all these years on something that hadn't been said, or maybe something you haven't confessed, and you've always wondered, are they still going to love me if they knew this about me? Are they still going to love me if they knew this about me? And one of the reasons why you feel unlovable is because you know there's this thing about you, you're not sure if somebody's going to love you or not. Then finally, you get to the point where you say, okay, we need to have this conversation. Here's something I did. This is who I truly am. And then when the person is either going to accept you or they're going to reject you at that point. Right? Whichever way they go, though, it's no longer something that's going to be haunting you and hounding you day in and day out and coming up when you don't even know why it is you feel bad. Sometimes the reason why is because you question whether or not the people who love you really love you because they don't really know you. But it's really fun. You get to actually, maybe at some point, you'll be able to cross some of these things off the list because you'll actually be able to deal with them. Some of them you'll be able to deal with pretty quickly. Some of them just take a conversation. I will never forget being in the hospital with somebody who had a couple of these on their list, and they had a terminal illness. And one of the things we talked about was making a list like this. And I said, she was going to have about a year before this took her life. And so she said, how do I prepare myself to die? What a question, huh? One of those things I said, before you are ready to walk into heaven, I want you to be able to walk into heaven having nothing that you haven't confessed to God and having nothing you haven't confessed to somebody else that you need to get right with. Because for the first time in your life, let's ask this question for honestly, really, what do you have to lose? And it spun the whole situation over. And I'll never forget coming back like a week later and the joy I saw on her face. And I'm thinking to myself, you've got terminal illness. Why are you all giddy? And she said, because I'm free. I'm free. So some of these things will be major. Some of these things will be just something that needs a conversation. Some of these things are going to be just things that you just have to have a conversation with God about. And you just need to sit down with God and have some conversation with him. God, I've been holding on to this too long. God, I've been frustrated with you about this. I felt like you've betrayed me on this. I felt like I can't trust you on these things, and these are an issue I've had. I'm giving this over to you, God. Help me trust you with this. I have faith in you, but help me in my unbelief and where I struggle with my faith. Maybe other things where you just say, God, I need you to forgive me for this. This was a sin between me and you alone, and I don't want this out there anymore. And so it'll just be something that you confess straight up to God. There'll be other things on there that's just a reality you have to embrace. Whether it's a my bad or a your bad, the fact of the matter is now it's bad, but it's something I can't change. What's done is done, and I have to accept it. This is my reality. I can't fight it anymore. I just have to acknowledge, I just have to accept it. I can gripe about it, I can complain about it, but it's not going to change my reality. So maybe I need to handle this a different way and find a different way to deal with this reality, because the reality is not going away. Fighting it's not going to help anymore. And so as you go through this list, what you're going to find is what in your mind unorganized feels like a million things, written down now is a list of things. And then as you look through that list, you'll begin to see that the stuff that's going to really take a concerted effort oftentimes is anywhere from 1 to 10 things or so. And that's a manageable list. And you can start to really work on that. And then you can look at this and say, okay, which one either can I get the most success with first, or which one is it that I really need to put my efforts towards? You can go through and begin to organize this list. Now, in that as you're working through, you might say, okay, well, how do I figure out what I'm going to be putting down on this list? I'm going to give you 4 categories tonight to get you started off. The first is dealing with your relationships with others. One of these categories is my relationship with others. Now, keep in mind on this, there's some my bad in here, there's some your bad in here, and there's also could just be some it's bad. That applies to all these things. When you look at the relationship you have with others, who's hurt me? Who have I hurt? Who's the my bad and the your bad on this? In the category of hurt. Is there issues of bitterness that I'm dealing with? Who do I have bitterness towards? So somebody who I feel like they're bitter towards me. Have I taken revenge on somebody? Am I still planning and plotting revenge? Is there somebody that I would be really, really happy if something really bad happened to them? I would never want to do it because I'm too godly and Christian of a person. However, if calamity happened, I wouldn't be shedding a tear. Just keeping that in mind. Is there somebody that I've gossiped about? Now, when I said the heart is deceitful above all things, you will lie to yourself about this one, because nobody ever gossips. I know nobody. Now, it happens about you and you watch other people do it, but nobody ever can admit to gossip, because we don't gossip. We have 100 other words for that. But honestly, if I shared things about somebody that either wasn't true or I shouldn't have shared, have I broke confidence where I shouldn't have broke confidence? Is there issues of jealousy out there? Who am I jealous of? I could be jealous of 100 different things in their life. Another category, priorities. What's important to you? I'll start with a couple of the easy ones, and I'll get to the one that's always kind of a pet thing for me. Talk about what's your priorities. Everybody has a list of what they want their priorities to be, but then there's also another list of what your priorities actually are. And so you can start by saying, here's what I want them to be, here's what I think they are, and if you want to do a fearless inventory, ask the people closest to you in your life, what are my priorities? You can even give them the categories. Here's give them in no particular order, how would you list out how I actually spend my life? What do you actually feel like my priorities are? Because some of you may feel like as if you're putting family number 1 in your life, but your family feels like as if they come in about a distant 5th. Where do they put the priorities down? What is your schedule, your time, and your money say your priorities are? That's an easy one. The forensic accounting is an easier one. Where are you spending the most of your money? On yourself, on your family, at work? What is it? Part of the priorities question, though, this is a really hard one. This is always a pet thing is for me that trying to discover is, what's really driving you? What's really driving you? I remember years ago, I read a book called Shadow Mission. Now, what's funny is, you ever read a book that you thought was about something, but it's not about that at all, but you really wish it was about the other thing, but you didn't even know about the other thing until you read the title of the book? Did I lose you on that? All right. I saw the name of this book called Shadow Mission. And when I read the title of it, I thought this is what it was talking about. But it was talking about something totally different. But since then, it's really developed in my mind is this idea of sometimes we'll say we're doing something for a stated reason, but that's not at all why we're doing it. So why did you start coming to church? Well, I felt like it was, I wanted to come to church and, I wanted to, get closer to God. And, that's why I'm here. I just, think about those kind of things. Real reason, so your wife will quit nagging you. So your shadow mission, while you're really there in the shadows, in the deep, dark recesses of your soul, your real driving motivation is to get your wife to quit yelling at you. Or maybe you've got some deal where if you go to church, then you get to watch football. I've heard those. Sometimes we have these, shadow missions. Well, I just want to volunteer to help out. Remember I said sometimes people volunteer and help out simply because they want the attaboys and the pats on the backs? So the shadow mission there, what's really kind of there lurking in the shadows, is this: I have this need to get appreciation and acceptance and significance, and that's why I'm really serving. But if anybody asks me, it's, well, I just felt like it was the right thing to do, and I just really wanted to help out. When I saw how much they were hurt, I just couldn't help but just go out there and reach out to them. Shadow mission sometimes is a kind word for some of these things, but sometimes you may state there's a reason why you're doing something. It's not really the reason why you're doing it. Some people have a shadow mission for why they get married. For some people, there's a shadow mission for why they take a job. It's really not about what they really love to do. They took the job because there was a prestige involved in it, or they thought that everybody would be impressed with their job title. And that's why they're really there, but they don't really want to admit it because it doesn't sound good to say, well, I'm really only here doing a job I really can't stand just so everybody be impressed with my job title. So the question on those priorities is, as you look at your reasons for why you're doing things, is there a shadow mission there? Is there something that deep down is why you did it, or why you are continuing to be a part of it, but nobody else really knows it? But it's really an issue there. Another category is looking through and doing a searching and fearless moral inventory of your attitudes. Like anger. One question is what gets me angry? Another question might be is, do I get angry or am I just angry? Right? Some of y'all know the difference between those two. Somebody who's just angry, everything is a reason to go, right? It's like the pot's already boiling, and you so much as just touch it and it shoots off. Other people, there's something, it takes something to get them there. What am I thankful for? Just list out the things you're thankful for. It's funny, how far you get on that list may reveal to you how thankful you really are. What are my gripes? If somebody were to say, give me your beef, what are your beefs? What are you upset about? What are you angry about? What are you going to put in there? How long is your gripe list? And then, of course, you can go back and compare. Do I have more things I'm griping about or more things I'm thankful about? You can go through different, other categories, attitudes. Move on to another one. Integrity. Let's just put one big category of lies. Under that, you can put lies I tell, misleading things about me, maybe an image you want to project. I don't know what your communications are. Just think through your communications. What about your communications isn't authentic? How is it that people see you versus how you really are? How much of that do you contribute towards? Like, do I want people to see me this certain way, and that's why they see me this certain way? Where do you draw the line between acceptable lies and unacceptable lies? I know you're in church going, did our pastor say that? I didn't say there are. I'm just asking you where you draw the line. Like when daylight savings time hits and it's only 6 o'clock, but it's dark out. So you're like, oh, kids, it's bedtime. It's already 8. They can't tell time. Is that an acceptable lie or not? I don't know. Maybe. On the integrity issue is there stuff that's in my possession that shouldn't be in my possession? Do I have stuff that belongs to somebody else? Am I taking stuff home from work that shouldn't be taken home from work? Go through those different things. Over the course of doing those things, you'll begin to get a picture of who you are. A couple things I kind of want to remind you of is there is no sin that you can ever commit that will ever change God's opinion of you. In the same way, if you have kids, if your kids were to write out everything they've ever done against you, what loving parent would ever look at their kids and go, oh my goodness, I'm done with you. Find somewhere else to live. It's absurd, right? Yet God reminds you, it says, you are a wicked parent compared to how loving I am. The most loving parent you can possibly think of, if you put them up next to me, would look wicked compared to me. That's what God says. So as you go through this list, you might have some tendency to almost want to fudge on it a little bit because it's starting to make you look real, real bad. That's why you need to have a fearless moral inventory. Don't be afraid of the truth. What do you have to be afraid of? I wish you could have the same perspective that woman on her deathbed had. What do I have to fear now? What are they going to tell me? They don't forgive me? Okay, that's now on them. That's no longer on me. At some point in your life, my hope and prayer is that you get to the point where you're just willing to face the truth. I don't care, I just want to be free. I don't care, I just want to be free. When Jesus tells a story in Luke 15 about a guy who's in a pig pen, and he gets to the point where he says he finally came to his senses and no longer feared going home. So he goes home. My hope and prayers for you is the same thing as you look at your past. Let's close out in prayer. Father, I thank you, Lord, for your grace over us. Everything that we will go through and uncover are things you already know and things that your Son has already died on the cross for. Help us keep this in mind as we move through our life and do a searching and fearless moral inventory of it. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.